On August 10, 1996, two young girls, Pamela and Michelle Ames, aged 9 and 5, were playing peacefully in their home in Jacksonville, Florida. The young girls were under the care of their loving 31-year-old mother. That day, however, their laughter was replaced by rushed breathing and panic as they couldn't find their mother. Their patient waiting brought no change to the deafening silence of the void left by the prolonged absence of their mother. This was very unusual for the caring mother who never left her daughters alone for long. Sadly, when the sisters did hear about their mom, it forever altered the course of their lives. Their mother, Valerie Ames, was found several hours later, beaten, stabbed, and dead in a vacant apartment far away from her home. However, the apartment didn't belong to any of her friends or family. In fact, the homeowner wasn't even present in the house when she was murdered. How did Valerie end up in an unoccupied apartment? What had happened inside the empty house that ended with her losing her life? And above all, how was the long-standing cold case finally solved after 28 years? Valerie Ames was known for her positive energy and her fondness for animals and her kids. The gentle soul loved riding horses, camping, and most of all, taking care of her little babies. While Valerie's friends and neighbors remembered her as always being full of life, all of it was very cruelly drained from her in August 1996. Valerie was found dead in a pool of blood with numerous stab wounds. Notably, she was found in a residence at the Courtyard Apartments on King Street in the neighborhood of Riverside, Jacksonville. Her corpse was discovered after an alarm was raised by her neighbors when her daughters reached out to them and revealed that their mom was missing. An investigation revealed that the person who actually owned the apartment had been arrested just a day before and placed behind bars for an unrelated crime. But if the owner of the apartment had such a rock-solid and bulletproof alibi, how did Valerie get into the house on that ill-fated day? The arrested owner said that the place had been left unlocked when he was taken away. Apart from the killer who had stabbed and badly beaten Valerie, the murder weapon was also missing. However, the Jacksonville Police Department found over 30 pieces of evidence in the apartment that they hoped would help them hunt the attacker down. Although the cops worked hard to test all the evidence, the technology of 1996 didn't allow them the edge needed to expose the murderer. As a result, the case got shelved amongst the other cold cases while the evidence was stored away in the hopes that it would be useful later on. While the police had their hands tied, Valerie's kids were forced to swallow their pain and grow up without the loving touch of their mother. The murder of Valerie Ames was still sitting unresolved in a corner of the Jacksonville Police Archives in 2018. That year, however, saw the resurrection of the 500-page case file at the request of Valerie's daughters. Detective Harmony Brooks and her team revealed that they'd reopened the case and were confident of finding the killer now. While the case was 22 years old at that point, forensic technology had also evolved in that time. Detective Brooks spoke to First Coast News and assisted the channel in releasing a cold case documentary on Valerie Ames. She said that there were over 30 pieces of evidence found at the crime scene that day that would now be tested with modern equipment to hunt Valerie's killer down. The police found some breadcrumbs to follow. Slowly, the Jacksonville police pieced several things together and made use of new advanced DNA testing methods in the hopes of identifying the killer. The 22-year delay did pose several challenges, but detectives were determined to catch the killer this time. Finally, in April 2024, the police got the breakthrough they needed 6 years after reopening the case from 1996. On April 2, 2024, the Jacksonville Police Department announced that they'd made an arrest in the Valerie Ames homicide case. The suspect, 69-year-old Jerry Phillips, was apprehended after almost 28 years. The announcement was made by Jacksonville Police Sheriff T.K. Waters at a press conference. Sheriff Waters spoke to the media and restored the public faith in police work and how detectives work very hard on every case. The apprehended suspect was picked up from Johnson County in North Carolina and charged with the murder of Valerie Ames. It was also revealed that the killer wasn't a random stranger to his victim. Despite the questions of the media, Sheriff Waters didn't reveal what exactly led them to Phillips, but said he was happy to finally catch him. Phillips was charged with battery and second-degree murder, which says that Valerie's murder wasn't premeditated, but circumstantial. This further begs the question of what exactly happened to the 31-year-old. It also raises the question of whether Jerry was the only person involved in this. Michelle James, the younger daughter of Valerie Ames, who was only 5 at the time of her killing, also made a media appearance after the arrest of Phillips. Michelle, who had only a handful of photographs to keep her mom alive in her heart, expressed both joy and anger when her old wound was reopened. She said that all she and her family had been waiting for was to see Valerie get justice. The Valerie Ames case is still ongoing, and more elements will soon be revealed, following which Jerry Phillips will also face a court trial. Although all those 28 years of struggle can't be reversed, Michelle and her family can now breathe a little easier. August 8th, 2000. A quiet day in Beckley, West Virginia, took a chilling turn. Natasha Alex Carter, a bright-eyed child, and her mother, Susan Carter, 41, vanished into thin air. There were no hints, no clues, just an unsettling void where their presence once filled the air. Susan's life with her new husband, Larry Webb, added another layer of complexity to the disappearance. How could a mother and daughter vanish without a trace from the comfort of their own home? Or were they taken away from this world by someone close that they trusted? And ultimately, what kept this story buried in cold case files for 24 years? For Rick Lafferty, Alex's father, it was like waking from a dream to find his daughter erased from existence. She never called him or reached out to him. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and the search for Alex and Susan yielded no answers. They'd seemingly evaporated into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Rick held a strong belief about who might be responsible for his family's disappearance, but the challenge was getting someone in the authorities to take him seriously. However, sometimes all it takes is one person in the right place to change everything, and Rick didn't give up until he found that person: FBI Special Agent Jennifer King. When the United States Marshal Service brought the missing case to the FBI's attention, Rick felt nobody else would listen to him except for Agent King. It was Agent King who then decided she wouldn't rest until Alex was found. With the help of other law enforcement personnel, she brought new energy to the case, reigniting hope and finding out what happened to Alex. In the initial stages of her disappearance, people suspected her mother might have taken her and left West Virginia. Because Susan had a rough relationship with Rick, she moved in with Webb at his residence in Beckley. At the same time, there's an ongoing custody dispute between Susan and Rick. The FBI's documents reveal Susan had told Rick during their custody dispute that he'd never see his daughter again. They also warned the public that Susan might change her appearance and use the alias Susan Gail Carter Webb. Alex's grandmother, Shirley Day, also remembered Alex saying she was afraid of her mother and didn't want to live with her. She vividly recalled Alex's testimony in court during the custody battle, where Alex expressed her fears. Rick believed Alex disappeared months before the official missing date listed on posters. He also claimed that Susan didn't show up for the next court hearing, which led him to being granted full custody. But by then, it might have been too late. Even though posters said Alex was last seen on August 8, 2000, Rick believed she went missing months earlier, soon after Susan's clear warning that he would never see Alex again. The FBI offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to a resolution in the case. Law enforcement officials suspected Susan of abducting Alex, and a felony warrant for kidnapping was issued for Susan on November 13, 2000. At an FBI press conference, Rick tearfully pleaded for his daughter's return, expressing his longing to have her back home no matter the circumstances. 20 years passed since Alex and Susan disappeared, and age progression photos created by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children depicted what Alex and Susan might look like in 2021. Rick suspected Susan's new husband, Larry Webb, might be responsible for Alex's disappearance. The FBI shared the suspicion and executed 2 search warrants at Webb's home. And that's when they made a chilling discovery. During an August 2023 search, officers found a bullet lodged in a remodeled bedroom wall, along with traces of blood. Forensic testing confirmed the DNA on the bullet matched Alex's, leading to an unsettling realization of the violence that may have occurred. Caregiver Terry Lilly, who looked after Webb, recounted the searches that led to this shocking discovery, emphasizing the significance of the evidence found behind the bedroom wall. Now, DNA testing confirmed that all the collected evidence belonged to the missing girl. Sadly, just days after that interview, Terry passed away. However, investigators also gathered witness statements, further contributing to the mounting evidence against Webb. When asked about the additional evidence leading to the indictment in 2023, authorities were cautious due to the ongoing nature of the investigation. They mentioned DNA evidence and witness statements, but refrained from divulging specific details at that point. One neighbor, whose name wasn't disclosed, who moved to Kyle Lane in 1999, claimed to have seen a young girl at Webb's house during the summer of 2000. Although he only saw her once, he became suspicious when he noticed a missing child poster in the neighborhood a year later. In 2021, upon learning about the investigation into missing persons, he believed the child he saw was Alex Carter. The neighbor also recalled seeing another woman at Webb's house shortly after Susan and Alex disappeared. This newfound statement was a breakthrough for detectives, redirecting their focus squarely onto Webb for a confession regarding the fate of Alex and her mother. Webb, now elderly, allegedly suffered from dementia, which he purportedly used to his advantage. According to Webb and his caregiver, his memory was failing, and he claimed not to remember anything about the disappearance of the mother and daughter. Despite being romantically involved in Susan, he professed love for both her and Alex, strongly denying any involvement in their disappearance. He insisted that he'd searched for them over the years and recalled being away on a trip when they went missing. However, he believed he had contacted the police in Charleston and Beckley and had undergone a polygraph test in the aftermath, but the results of which never seemed skeptical. Webb's caregiver cautioned that his memory was unreliable due to dementia, suggesting that his recollection of events may be flawed. And Webb kept asserting that he loved Susan and Alex deeply, expressing remorse over not being able to find them despite his efforts. Despite his assertions of innocence, suspicions continued to mount against Webb, with investigators scrutinizing his every word and action in the hope of uncovering the truth. As the investigation drew closer to the truth, the FBI decided to increase the reward for information, raising it from $10,000 to $20,000. However, some wondered if this gesture was too little too late. And so, state police made a significant announcement declaring that Susan was no longer suspected of kidnapping Alex. Tony Rossa of the FBI admitted that mistakes had been made in the investigation at the outset and that they were looking into why signs had been missed. Meanwhile, Rick expressed his frustration with the Wyoming County Sheriff's Department's handling of the case. He believed that if they'd taken his concerns seriously from the beginning, Alex would still have been alive today. Despite his pleas, they initially dismissed Alex's disappearance, insisting she was with her mother. Nevertheless, with Susan being declared not a suspect in the kidnapping case, after 23 long years, the case had finally reached a critical juncture. The focus now shifted to locating the bodies of Alex and Susan. In October 2023, 2 months after the last search warrant, it was determined that Alex had been murdered in her room at Webb's Kyle Lane home. Webb, now in his 80s, was indicted on October 24, 2023 with murder charges for the disappearance of Susan and Alex Carter. Ben Hatfield, the Raleigh County prosecuting attorney, expressed confidence in the case against Webb. Despite Webb's declining health and the legal challenges involved in his arrest, Hatfield was determined to pursue justice for Alex and Susan. Due to Webb's deteriorating health and the legal hurdles associated with obtaining medical clearance for his arrest, his incarceration was delayed until April 2024. The grand jury was presented with the evidence and an indictment was requested. The delays continued for a while, despite efforts to expedite the process, including visits to nursing homes where Webb stayed. However, it was during one of these visits that a breakthrough in the case occurred. On April 24, 2024, Special Investigator Jeff Schote and retired Chief of Detectives from the Beckley City Police Department visited the Hilltop Nursing Home where Webb was residing before a court date. During their conversation, Webb gave a detailed and unequivocal confession. He admitted to shooting Susan Carter after suspecting her of taking cash from his home. The argument that followed led to her death. Webb then confessed to shooting Alex for eliminating the sole witness. According to Webb's confession, he stored the bodies in the basement of his home overnight before burying them in a shallow grave in the woods on his property over the next 2 nights. He buried them together, clad in their clothes. Webb's confession provided closure to a case that had haunted investigators in the community for over 2 decades. Despite the challenges faced along the way, the relentless pursuit of justice ultimately prevailed. The confession served as a crucial piece of evidence, shedding light on the events that led to the untimely deaths of Susan and Alex Carter and bringing some semblance of closure to their grieving loved ones, especially Rick, who'd been waiting to know what happened to his daughter for nearly 2 long decades. With the confession finally received, law enforcement officers were determined to bring little Alex back home to her father and find closure for the grieving family. However, Webb's deteriorating health and memory hindered the search efforts. Despite his attempts to guide them to the burial site, Webb was unable to provide an exact location. In a display of unwavering commitment, neighbors Grant and Tammy Newhouse, owners of New Horizons Landscaping, volunteered their time and equipment to assist with the excavation. They tirelessly combed through Webb's backyard, row by row, until their efforts were rewarded. And on April 11, 2024, after 2 days of exhaustive searching, the bodies of Alex and Susan Carter were finally discovered. The moment was bittersweet, marking the end of a 24-year-long search for closure. Tragically, just hours before the discovery, Webb passed away in prison, escaping the full consequences of his heinous actions. Webb, who was incarcerated at Mount Olive, West Virginia, suffered what police are calling a medical episode. Webb was later pronounced dead at Montgomery General Hospital. According to a press release provided by Captain R.A. Maddy of the West Virginia State Police, Webb's medical emergency began at approximately 10:30 in the morning of April 11, 2024, just a few hours after the remains were found in his own backyard. For Rick, Alex's father, the discovery brought a mixture of emotions: relief that his daughter had been found, yet profound sadness at the circumstances of her death. His unwavering belief that one day she would come home had finally been realized, albeit in the most devastating way possible. As the case comes to a close, there is a glimmer of hope that the Carters can find some semblance of peace, knowing that Alex and her mother can finally be laid to rest. On April 11, 1968, 47-year-old Hiram Ross Graham, a decorated soldier from World War II, set out on his regular route as a milkman, but did not return home. A missing persons report was filed by the milk company in the evening when Graham's truck didn't return, long after his route was supposed to have been covered. After a thorough search failed to find him, the man was located the next day with the help of an aerial search deep in the woods of Vero Beach, Florida. Hiram Graham was lying dead next to his milk truck in the woods, shot 3 times, execution style. The veteran was slain days after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., which raised the possibility of its connection with violence over racial tensions. Who could have wanted the execution of a beloved milkman in the neighborhood? Was this a personal act of revenge, or did it have things to do with race or robbery? These questions remained unanswered for over half a century, finally finding resolution in 2024. Towards the end of World War II, the U.S. Army fought the Battle of the Bulge on the Western Front against Germany that helped turn the tide of the war, and among the heat of the battle was Hiram Ross Graham. Graham received the Purple Heart Medal from the president, given to the soldiers who sacrificed themselves greatly on the battleground. Graham later served as a chairman of band associations and commander of disabled American veterans. In the 1960s, Graham moved to Vero Beach, Florida with his family and started working as a milk salesman for the Borden Milk Company. Besides being a milk salesman, he was also the commander of the Civil Air Patrol for the district. The veteran-turned-warm-hearted milkman was loved by the consumers for his amiable nature, and he even used to chip in for the buyers who couldn't afford milk on any particular day. Hiram Graham and his wife Doris were parents of 2 boys and a girl. Graham was living a full life of pride in the scenic city of Vero Beach, but he couldn't have expected that all would end so suddenly. As he followed his usual delivery route on the Thursday morning of April 11, 1968, Graham was in the neighborhood of Gifford when he was seen engaged in a conversation by a local girl. That very moment became the last time he was seen alive. Graham didn't return home after a shift that day. Concerns began to rise when he didn't return the truck to the Ford Pierce office of the Borden Milk Company after covering his delivery route in Gifford. The Indian River County Sheriff's Office was alerted, and they began a local search in the areas around Graham's route, but he was nowhere to be found. As the concerns mounted the following day, a plane was arranged for an aerial search of the city and its forested areas. Officers spotted a chilling scene from the air when they flew across a wooded section between the North and South Gifford roads. Deep in the woods, a milk truck was spotted with a man lying next to it. When they located the scene, their worst fears were confirmed. It was Graham, shot 3 times, execution style. An autopsy report revealed the bullets were shot from a low-caliber weapon. There was also about $70 or $80 missing from the truck. When the locals along his route in Gifford were interviewed, officers learned about the girl who saw Graham lastly. She stated that she approached the milkman's truck and saw him engaged in a conversation with two African-American men. Graham told the girl he'd be back soon, and the three of them drove away in Graham's truck. After that, locals had heard a few shots being fired. A police description of the case said that an early 1950s model Chevrolet, occupied by two unknown males, was seen leaving the area at high speed minutes after the shots were heard. The two African-American males who were seen hopping into Graham's milk truck were carrying guns, as per the statement of the girl who saw them. Did Graham know them personally, or did they threaten Graham for some unknown reason? The mystery remained as to why and how they managed to hop into Graham's truck. Both of them, however, remained unidentified. Despite the authorities' best efforts, the killers were successful in eluding them. One of Graham's sons, Larry Edwin Graham, who was just 16 at the time, was given the news about his father's death by the sheriff's officers. On April 15, 1968, Hiram was buried in Crestlawn Cemetery after a military farewell service. Over the next 6 years, several efforts were made, and over 15 investigations occurred through the county in order to generate leads on the offenders. But none of the leads panned out. The murder of the veteran soldier went cold for good. 38 years passed, and the grisly incident of Graham's homicide was long forgotten. In 2006, Graham's son Larry came forward to raise a voice for his father's case. Larry Graham and the family, while doing an open interview with a local media outlet, accused a man named Thomas Williams from Indian River County for committing the murder of Hiram Graham. Larry stated the family had been positive about the potential involvement of this individual, though the reasoning behind this was never revealed. This was the first time in 38 years that the case showed some signs of life, and seeing this, the sheriff's office decided to reopen it. But before the department could examine the accusation and learn more about this individual, Thomas Williams, who lived in Indian River County itself, Williams himself wrote a letter to the editor of the newspaper. He complained that his name had been wrongfully accused in a random case, and he didn't possess any knowledge about the matter. He denied any involvement in the case and warned the newspaper not to dishonor his name. The investigation lost momentum due to this and went dormant once again. The cold case attracted its first clues years later when, in 2022, a lead reached Indian River County authorities from an unexpected source. The lead came from within the county jail itself. An inmate, whose identity wasn't revealed, but who was related to Thomas J. Williams, stated that Williams had confessed to him about murdering the milkman in the past. This inmate told the detectives that Thomas Williams was a very dangerous man and had been arrested and convicted many times for numerous other felonies. Detectives wanted rock-solid confirmation for this statement, so they searched for more people related to Thomas Williams. After interviewing some of them, they tracked down a woman from Miami in 2023 who was married to Williams in the past before they got divorced. She also chose to remain anonymous, but was able to provide the authorities with the final piece of information they needed. She testified that Williams had admitted to her too about shooting the milkman dead in the past. The detectives now had two separate testimonies, as both these witnesses had never met each other, and neither of them had any knowledge of the other's statement. Although the department now had more than enough evidence to convict the accused, Thomas Williams had died a natural death in 2016. Sheriff Eric Flowers said that both the witnesses came forward only because Thomas Williams was deceased. When alive, witnesses admitted he was a dangerous individual who was a threat to them and their families. Both the witnesses told the police in their separate statements that the death of Williams had given them the courage to come forward. Larry stated that the killing of his father came at a time when racial tensions were high due to the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. He thinks that his father may have become a target in the predominantly African-American residential area of Gifford. But Sheriff Flowers denied the claims and firmly stated that robbery was the motive of the killers. The Borden Milk Company confirmed after Graham's death that about $70 to $80 was missing from the truck. About the second partner who accompanied Thomas Williams in the homicide, Sheriff Flowers said that they had an idea about who it could be, but needed confirmation from more witnesses. He's encouraged anyone with knowledge about the case to come forward and contact the Indian River County Sheriff's Office. In April 2024, Thomas J. Williams was convicted for the murder of Hiram Graham. In the press conference, Larry Graham remembered the courageous life led by his father and the long wait his family had to endure. The Graham family finally had their closure after 56 years, and the soldier-spirited Hiram Graham rested in peace as a war hero.